So our first presenter, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that I say his name correctly, is Dr. David Peridian. Did I say that correctly?
Well, you got it very close, but I don't think it was actually your fault. I didn't notice. I proofread these slides as well, but my last name is spelled incorrectly. It's Perdian, so that's what threw you off. You would have, I know you would have got it if it would have been spelled correctly.
Peridian. So
Perdian, yeah.
Peridian,
If it's Diam, Perdian, yeah.
Dr. Peridian. So Dr. Peridian is an associate professor of chemistry at Broward College. He was named the Professor of the Year at North Campus and is the Barbara J. Bryan Endowed Teaching Chair recipient. Since 2016, he has served as a faculty development coordinator for Broward College's Center for Teaching Excellence and Learning. And David, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to you to go ahead and share. Thank you. David, I apologize. You're on mute.
Okay, I thought I was going to take controls, but all right. So I should be unmuted now. All right, thank you for that introduction. So today I'm going to talk just briefly about sort of a broad range, broad sort of tool that I use in the classroom and in the remote environment that basically uses technology to somehow, some way get students connected to each other primarily, but then also enables a little bit of a better connection to me, okay? There's a variety of technologies we could talk about and how to use them. Most of the time, the technology is really, in my mind, kind of just the tool. It's not really what I, spend a lot of time thinking about how to use it. I usually come up with some of my learning activity or the learning experience that I'm going to have my students do in the classroom first. And then I think about, secondly, what technology tool can I use to sort of make things more efficient or to keep some type of artifact from my end if I want to give the students some type of points for them, take attendance, something along those lines. For me, it pretty much comes down to the when I'm thinking about the learning experience my students are going to go over in the classroom. If it's something that's more of a free response and it's maybe more subjective or maybe a longer answer, I usually sort of go the route of Google Docs in the Google applications that you have at your disposal if you have any type of Google account. If it's a calculation or a graph, again, I teach chemistry, I might use Google Sheets. That's another good one. If it's sort of a question that is best used in a multiple choice type of format, I like Poll Everywhere, but Kahoot is a very good software platform that kind of very similar to Poll Everywhere in that regard, that can quickly display multiple choice questions. Plickr is another one, but that's uses a handheld placard to respond, have the students respond. So that's really only for the face-to-face classroom setting, which I have used, but I'm trying to keep things more free to use in any type of setting. So, that's where I probably recommend you look at Kahoot or maybe Poll Everywhere. Those can be used in a face-to-face classroom, online or remote setting. But again, the technology, and we can certainly talk about what technologies to use in certain settings, but that really isn't, that's the secondary thought process when I come up with these activities. But I certainly, the collaborative component of these activities is, I think, much more important, okay? By getting them to do something with the technology, it promotes active learning. By them actually doing something instead of just listening to me in the classroom or remote setting. by breaking them up into small groups using breakout groups in Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, they get to engage with their peers, always in every activity we do. Then the added bonus of breaking them up into smaller groups is that if we're in the face-to-face classroom, I'd stroll around, guide them through the process, visit each group, for a few seconds here and there. In the breakout groups, I can actually enter each group, listen in on them for a few seconds, talk to them as needed. And so they get a much lower student to teacher ratio when I do that. Instead of me talking to all of my students at once, which, most of my lectures are, 40 to 50 students, I can go into a breakout session and just engage with students at, 4 or 5 at a time. So that just really breaks that student to teacher ratio down. And by far, the thing that I really want to impress upon, everyone that came tonight is that it's a really amazing way to get students to feel connected to each other. And there's so much research out there that I'm sure you've probably seen or heard from that shows that how well a student feels connected to their classroom, to their professor, to their campus, to their college, really has a big impact on their success in individual courses and their success and retention throughout their matriculation through a college setting. And I'm sure you've seen research or read research out there that shows the very poor levels of student retention. And of course at Broward College, that's something we try to work on and think about as faculty members and members of CTEL. Their studies show a few years ago now, 2015, but almost 70% of first-year students don't return for their second year. And I think at the community college level, at least anecdotally, I would venture to say that's even higher if this is a national study. But if you look at students, the reasons why they don't return for the second year, academics, just pure academics, whether or not they can, handle the content is certainly up there. But in research after research study, students have this feeling of whether or not they fit into the classroom and fit in onto the campus really does impact their retention rates. And the predictor was highest among ethnic minorities. Of course, at Broward College, we have an extremely diverse student population. And so that's very important to me and my colleagues. I'm sure it's important to you at your institutions. And then for me as a chemistry faculty, we have a real problem in the STEM field of people changing their major. They start out in chemistry, they start out in physics, they start out in computer science, Michelle's field. They're really interested in it, but it's tough to get through those first courses. And if they don't feel connected to the faculty or peers, they're more likely to change their major to another pathway or another department, which is a big problem for us because we know we need people in the STEM fields, for the careers that are out there. So just a couple more references for how important it is to get students to connect with each other, and why I feel getting them to get connected with each other is so important. Student connectedness is a strong predictor of involvement in classroom, and we know if they're going to be involved in the classroom actively learning, that's going to increase their student success. We know self-efficacy and intrinsic motivation is really important, and again, research shows that class belonging really impacts those. And then, just threw this in here, why do I talk about technology in here, is that it just sort of helps me as sort of a tool to help keep track of students' participation, for points if I want to give them. Initially when I really started to do this a lot in my courses, one problem that I would have is student buy-in, especially going back when I started this was primarily face-to-face. I'd break them up into groups, and they'd sit there and they'd barely talk with each other, even though I've asked them to work on a problem or think about a prompt. As soon as I said, hey, this is going to be worth some points for your grade, suddenly I got a lot more buy-in. And the technology has helped me sort of keep track of that student participation, keep track of points, and things of that nature. At Broward College, the majority of our classes are still in a remote environment. All of my classes are still in a remote environment. So how am I doing this now? Whereas in the classroom, it's just easy to move around the chairs, break up into small groups. You use the breakout sessions in either Blackboard Collaborate, which I use primarily still, even though we're losing it after the semester. So I'll be using Zoom quite a bit more in the summer and fall, but the technology is the same. Give them a prompt, usually as a whole, talk about it, maybe field some questions, and then and when I send them into the groups, usually small, depending on the size of the classroom, 4 to 5 students, maybe 6 in my larger lectures, break them up. And one thing that I found with the technology, in addition to keeping me on track or keeping track of what's going on with the students, I think when they see the technology, whether it be a poll, native poll from Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate, or using Poll Everywhere, or if it's a open prompt, I use Google Docs. When they see that, I think it gives them a little bit more. I guess it gets them primed and ready to go much quicker. I know that I've experienced this as a participant in courses and workshops and seminars. When everybody gets thrown into a breakout group, it takes a little while to get started. Nobody's sure how to talk, or what or when to talk, or how to get started. Sometimes we even I even hear oh, what are we supposed to do again? By having the prompt up right away and giving them something to work on, something to interact with, I think it gets them going a little bit easier than if I just threw them in a breakout session and they're just there to fend for themselves. Especially initially at the beginning of the semester, I think the technology really helps for this. So here's a example of just one of the Google Docs I would give to my students. You can share these via a link. They click the link, then they can start to work on this. I saw a question, and I'll try to answer more questions as I see the chat room. I actually initially didn't have it open. I apologize for that. But so, for instance, for keeping track of this, in this group setting, they can just give them a link. They click on it. They would, as a group, they put their names in group 1, put their answer in the furthest column on the right, the third column, and then I can keep that document. I can always view that document and record the participation as needed. Other things like Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, you can record responses using those technologies. But something like a Google Doc is really easy for keeping track of participation. They put their name, they put their answers. I can always look back at it at any point in time later. So just a little bit about who my learners are. If you're not familiar with Broward College and the students that would take a chemistry course at Broward College, the majority of my students are first-time in college, first-time college students, fairly young, either right out of high school or a couple years removed, either by taking some time off or just getting the prerequisites done required for General Chemistry 1, which does have some math prereqs. I do have, a small 10 to 20% of, non-traditional students that are coming back that want to go into a professional program like pre-med, pre-dentistry, pharmacy. So I do have, a smattering of those students as well. The vast majority are STEM majors for the chemistry courses that I teach. So I really want them to, stay in my classes, do well so that they can go on to the next chemistry from Gen Chem 1 to Gen Chem 2, then from general chemistry into organic chemistry and the whole host of STEM courses that they're going to need to take. And I know that, their success and retention is, really important. And I think by getting them connected to each other would really help. And then I've got one more slide. I know I'm running out of time. Usually 2 more slides. How I usually do it is I've got, right now I'm teaching blended courses in a remote setting. And so I have a flip type class structure where I ask them to watch pre-lecture videos. We talk about the concepts for the first 10 to 15 minutes, and then they'll go and do that exercise for 10, 15 minutes. Then we'll review that exercise. And sometimes we'll do it a second time. I found that they get tired of it within a class setting. So the very few times I've tried it a third time, it did not go well. They're kind of just done with it. So that's one thing I would definitely, unless, somehow, at least in my experience, less is more on these types of activities. And just in my anecdotal evidence, I really do think that trying to get students to work together in small group activities is really powerful. It gets them connected, helps me to get connected with them, and it really
Whoever's got the
makes a
dog,
lot
can
of
you
good.
please mute yourself? Thank you.
All right, but that's my activity that I wanted to share with you. So hopefully it spawn some ideas for your classes. And Michelle did say we're going to have a Q&A session after the second presentation. So hopefully then I'll be able to get to some of those questions I saw pop up in the chat.